Thank you all so much for coming. I know my mother would have been very touched to see all these loving faces here to celebrate her. For those who don't know me, I'm Catherine Park. I'm Doris's daughter, and I had the amazing good fortune to be her only child. When I was a teenager, she tried to be normal for me now and then. I remember her standing on a chair in the living room, wearing only her Freudian slip, putting on a presentable dress for my high school graduation. Whenever she dressed up, she sprayed herself from head to toe in Static Guard, which she called her middle-class spray, as if she would emerge from this magical mist, transformed into a normal mother. She never did. She never was. She wasn't a normal mother, a normal wife, a normal sister, or a normal friend. She simply experienced the world differently than most people do. At times, she frustrated many of us with her inability to attend to the practical details of life. She was much better at paying attention to moths in the moonlight than to paying bills. When I was young and had to rely on her, it was often difficult. But the other side of the coin was that she was also the funnest and funniest mother in the world. She saw beauty and made miracles where no one else did it. During my childhood in the 1970s, she studied at the university until way past midnight and would walk home through the empty, sleeping streets of Minneapolis. One steamy summer night on her way home, she came upon a broken water main that was creating a huge geyser in the street. Water was shooting up, taller than a house. No one was awake. No one was there trying to fix it. But more importantly, no one else was there to see it, which seemed totally wrong to her. She felt it was too incredible to go unappreciated. So she went walking around the neighborhood to find someone to show it to. After a while, she found a man standing out on a bridge that crossed over the freeway. She marched up to him and told him that he had to come with her. Startled, he refused. "No," he said. But she was wiry, strong as a donkey, and probably twice as stubborn. She locked her arm through his and physically wrestled him off the bridge. "You have to see this, you have to come with me," she insisted. She dragged him a few blocks and then showed him the geyser. "See, can't you believe this? Isn't this amazing?" The man looked up at it for a moment in awe and then said, "Wow, I can't believe this. I was about to jump off that bridge. I was counting down when you grabbed me." "Oh no," she said, "you can't do that. Come back to my house and have some coffee and tell me what's bothering you." They walked home talking and sat up the rest of the night as he told her about his divorce. She listened and reassured him that things would get better. When the sun came up, he went on his way, and she didn't think much more about it until one day, a couple of years later, the same man came up to her in a bar. "You," he shouted across the room as he ran towards her. "You're my guardian angel. You came out of nowhere, and you saved my life because you dragged me off that bridge to see a broken water main." He said that he was remarried now, and his life was so worth living. He bought her an orange juice, and they talked for a while about that night, and after that she never saw him again. A normal mother would never have done this. This is only one example of her ability to see beauty in unlikely places and her powerful, urgent need to share it with others. Communicating beauty that others overlook was one of her key missions on earth, I think. She had to make us see what she saw. Her artwork through her life springs from this impulse. She also provided an endless supply of marvelous and odd adventures. One day when I was in high school, she woke up with the seemingly spontaneous idea that she needed a baby piglet. It was Mother's Day, I think 1984. She said, "I think I should have a Mother's Day pig, don't you think so?" I said, "I need a Mother's Day pig." I thought that sounded fun, and we pulled my Aunt Judy into the scheme. Judy had an old beat-up car called the Ayatollah. We sat three abreast in the huge front seat, laughing and talking as we drove way out into the country, where there might be baby pigs. I think we headed to western Wisconsin and found a hog farm. There we announced our mission to a genial old farmer. Rows of wide-eyed farm children watched us as we headed to the hog barn and looked down into pens full of little 6-week-old piglets who had just been weaned. The perplexed kids kept saying, "A hog for a pet? And in the city?" I warmed to the task and climbed up on the fence saying, "Mom, Mom, I want that one." She said, anyone is fine, you can pick." I picked a little pink one with tiny hooves and an inch-wide rubbery snout that looked like it was dipped in ink. She was the smallest and the pinkest, with a layer of shiny white bristles over her back. She looked like she was walking in tiny high heels. Mom produced a rhinestone puppy leash she had been carrying in her pocket. We named her Gerda. She was the Mother's Day pig and slept in the kitchen in a cat bed and ate oatmeal and learned to heel and sit like a dog. She loved riding in cars and sitting on laps, and all this was tremendously fun and wonderful, for a few months anyway. But soon Gerda got so big that she couldn't sleep in the cat bed or sit on laps anymore. She had to move out to the donkey shed behind the house. She was thigh-high on my mother and would walk alongside her, heeling perfectly even without a leash, shocking tourists around Nicollet Island. Sometimes she would roam free, and one winter night she infamously jumped into someone's taxi cab and wouldn't get out. Midway through my freshman year at Vassar, I came home to Minneapolis for Christmas break. Mom and I were sitting in the living room upstairs, and I noticed Gerda leaping through the snow in a big open field below us. She would disappear behind a snowdrift and reappear midair like a very fat, ungainly gazelle. We watched her go by and laughed and talked about her piglethood and how cute she was. Then suddenly we heard a deafening crash from near the front of the house. We lived in a big old house on the second floor, and there was a hallway and staircase between us and the front porch. We peeked out and down the stairs. There was Gerda, rooting through the junk in the hallway below. She tossed a 2x4 over her shoulder, and we shrieked in fright. Then she threw a bicycle up onto her enormous back and rolled it off as if it weighed nothing. "Well, at least she doesn't remember how to climb stairs," said Mom optimistically. As if she heard this remark, Gerda suddenly looked straight up at us and broke towards us at a full gallop. She began thundering up the stairs at top speed. We slammed the door shut and braced our backs against it, giggling helplessly and screaming in fright. Gerda reached the top of the stairs and began throwing her full bulk at the door. Boom, boom, boom. The entire door trembled with each blow as we laughed and leaned against it and prayed that it would hold. After a few minutes, the earth-shattering collision slowed down and finally stopped. We heard small, tentative grunts as Gerda explored the landing. We waited and held our breath. Mom whispered, "I think she's getting bored." Soon we heard a few taps, and then a thunderous series of crashes as Gerda galloped or perhaps rolled down the stairs, and then ran off to soar through the snowy fields once again. I never would have had this experience with a normal mother. Yet for all the delight in moments like this, I spent my 20s being pretty angry at her. Luckily, I eventually came to appreciate her for who she was, and I'm so glad I did. I got married and settled in Cleveland, and Mom and I conducted most of our very close relationship on the phone. When our boys Isaac and Elias were born, she blossomed into a unique and doting grandmother. I think being a grandmother was the perfect role for her. She could send presents 2 months late, and the boys would be simply excited to get them. Every time they talked on the phone, she had some remarkable story to tell. Each summer I would bring our boys out to visit the farm. They would pet horses and sheep and catch bullfrogs in the pond and ride around in the sidecar of Grandpa Max's vintage Ukrainian motorcycle. They could visit the foundry and see an iron pour, or ride in the Washington County Democrats' truck in a parade, throwing candy to the kids and dog biscuits to the dogs. One time we rescued a huge snapping turtle that was trying to lay her eggs on the shoulder of a busy highway. Saving animals was another of her key missions on Earth. I always struggled with the pros and cons of emulating her in life, but I couldn't escape the basic need to rescue helpless and injured creatures other people would ignore. For instance, I was driving down a busy urban street in Cleveland one freezing morning. About a block away, I saw a bufflehead, a small black and white diving duck, in the road. It must have been about the year 2000, in one of those bare December mornings, after leaves but before snow. I said to myself, "What, is that a bufflehead? It must be a migrant blown off course. It can't even take off from land." It was flopping around in the middle of the street. As I hurried to help it, a van rolled over it, tossing it around between its wheels. When I pulled up beside it, it was gasping and bloody, but still alive. I stepped out into traffic, stopping the cars with a raised hand. I plopped a towel over the duck and scooped it up, and then quickly drove around the block and headed home. I brought it into our house and set it on a bed as I dialed my mother. "Mom, I have an injured bufflehead." I started off with no hello. "A bufflehead," she exclaimed. "It must be a migrant blown off course. It can't even take off from land." "I know," I exclaimed. And how did I know, I have to ask myself. Of course, I lived with her for my formative years and absorbed a lot just by osmosis. She walked me through a full veterinary exam as I cradled the phone under my chin. I checked gingerly for broken bones and crackling damaged air sacs, and luckily found none. Then she instructed me to give it a tablespoon of cream to dabble its beak in. "It needs calories," she said. I got a spoonful of cream and was astounded as it immediately began to dabble its beak in it, just as she had said. "Now put it in a bathtub full of cold water. They are miserable out of the water." I did this, and the tiny duck floated sadly, his pale feet hanging under him like rags. I sat on the bathroom floor on the phone, trying to reach a wildlife rehabber who could take him off my hands. I couldn't find one, so I just nursed him through the day and kept feeding him spoonfuls of cream. It seemed that nothing was seriously hurt on the duck. He was just scuffed and scraped on the head and hungry and lost. I decided the best course of action was to release him in Lake Erie, where he was trying to go in the first place. The next morning, I persuaded Ben to come with me to the lake before work. That's my husband over there. He grumbled a little bit, claiming that he had a meeting. But I was afraid I'd be mugged on the desolate urban shore by myself, and I couldn't bring my dog for protection because she might chase the duck. As Max knows, part of being married to people like us is that sometimes you have to assist in these projects, no matter how inconvenient. We drove to the lake in separate cars and walked down to the beach. I carried a shoebox with the almost weightless duck inside it. It was just after dawn, and the sand was hard and covered with frost. The still, glassy lake had a lacy rim of clear ice around the edge. The sunrise had colored the water and the sky soft pink. Pink mist covered the flawless surface of the lake. I lifted the lid of my shoebox and bent down, tentatively showing the duck the open water. Instantly the duck leapt forward into the water, little feet whirring like an outboard motor, and swam speedily towards the horizon. He left a wide, silky V in his wake. We watched him until it disappeared into the mist. Then we stood there silently for a moment. "That," Ben said quietly, "was beautiful." I never would have had that experience with a normal mother, nor would Ben have been out at the lake releasing a duck if he had had a normal mother-in-law. There are so many times I called her needing help with something odd, something that no one else would know. Like the time I called her at 2 a.m. and said, "Mom, I'm babysitting in a haunted house. I'm terrified. What do I do?" In those days, she was a committed night owl, and I knew she'd be up. Without a pause, she said, Well, get yourself a container of salt. Then pour a complete circle of salt around where you're sitting. Now make sure all the grains touch. I was cowering on a couch in a living room with a shag carpet, so I couldn't see how to make sure all the grains of salt would touch. Plus, I was especially terrified of the kitchen, so I just talked to her for an hour or so and then felt better. Or one time I called her from my car and said, "Mom, I've got a possum in a shopping bag. What's my next move?" What are we all going to do without her? I don't know. I just don't know. People have been asking those of us closest to her what they can do to help, and I do have a few practical requests for you. For the people of Washington County, I need you to help complete the project she devoted so much time and energy to in recent years, the restoration of the Bunker Mill Bridge. The bridge is restored, beautiful, and rightfully owned by people in this community, but the road is still closed at the far end, and we need that road open. A bridge that leads to a wall of chain link has accomplished little. I ask you to commit yourself to helping in any way you can, and don't stop until the Amish buggies and kids on bikes and moms with jogging strollers are rolling across that bridge to the other side and beyond. Secondly, please contribute to the fund that has been set up in my mother's name to support the Friends of the Bunker Mill Bridge. More practical concerns. My mother's numerous cats need homes. Take a cat into your life and love it as she would have wanted you to. Find a friend to take another cat. My mother's beloved horses also need homes. If you can add a horse or two to your pasture, please reach out to me or Max. Get involved in politics on any level. My mother had painful knees, and yet as recently as the past election, she was out knocking on doors and trying to get people to vote. If she can do that, you and I can do something more. Get a checkup. She had a deep distrust of doctors and only went in when she'd been kicked in the head by a horse or had her wrist shattered by a horse. Her thought was that if they looked for something wrong, they'll find it. I think that all of us that loved her now really wish she had checked. We wonder if there's anything that could have been done to prevent what happened. And now for some impractical concerns. Somewhere out there, there's a deaf, incontinent Great Dane with your name on it. There's a goat on dialysis. And there's a bald guinea pig with anxiety issues. If you can't handle something that difficult, start smaller. If you see a worm stranded on the sidewalk after a rain, just give it a lift back to the house. If you see a turtle trying to cross the road, pull over, get out, wait for a break in traffic, and carry it across in the direction it's headed. Plant milkweed. The monarchs need it. Put up a hummingbird feeder and a birdhouse. Put up a bat house. If a cat is stuck in a tree or a baby bird has fallen out of its nest, help. Mom's philosophy was that if fate throws an animal in need into your path, you have a responsibility to help it. This was another of her key missions in life. Maybe for you that means helping the animal get to someone else who can help it. But don't keep driving and don't keep walking and thinking that someone else will handle it. Step in. Most of all, I think she would want you to look, really look at the beauty around you. Right now, a dewdrop is casting a shadow on a rose petal. A bumblebee is dusty with pollen, and a butterfly's wings are opening and closing slowly like a breath. If you look closely at the beauty of nature, you'll begin to see something of what she saw everywhere, all the time. Tonight at the bridge, we're going to celebrate her life the way she would have wanted. We're going to tell funny stories and listen to music and dance and eat wonderful food. We're going to send her butterfly messages. And once in a while, we're going to walk over and look at the river. We'll take a minute to notice how it perfectly mirrors the trees and sky. And then we'll tune our ears to the sudden thump of the bullfrog and the elaborate, joyful song of the wren.